So thank you all for joining here, whether you're joining us in the next 9 days, which we have before the November 3rd election. One of the more important elections is not Biden-Trump, especially in Connecticut, where probably it's not going to change. But here, where 151 General Assembly seats, 36 Senate seats, and 5 congressional seats are all in play, thinking local and being acquainted with local candidates and how they, maybe more than a Biden or a Trump, can enhance or maybe not enhance our lives in Connecticut. That's what this is about. This is the Government Information Forums. We've been doing this for 3 years. I'm its host, Mark Stewart Greenstein, and I am proud today to be at the congressional level, filming 2 candidates for the 1st district. We might be joined by phone with a 3rd, but let me introduce the candidates and then the rules for how we engage here. Candidate to this side of me is Tom McCormick. He's the nominee of the Green Party for the 1st Congressional District. Candidate to this side is Mary Fay. She is the Republican Party's nominee for the 1st Congressional District. He would have been sitting here, but Mr. Larson, though invited, and in fact, the one who picked this time, now is a conflict. So if he chooses to call in the second half, we welcome it. We have a phone, but otherwise the discourse will be a good one because there's a lot of issues and ideas. TGIF does not ask questions of individuals. There wouldn't have been a searing, Mr. Larson, 3 years ago, you said F. We don't do that. The questions coming from our moderator and potentially coming from people in the audience are for everyone to respond to. And the rules of responding look like this. The candidates have as much or as little time as they wish. If a candidate wants to wax eloquently or deeply about one issue, we don't cut that off. If there's not much to say about that issue, simply, I agree. 2-second response, and you are husbanding your time. The candidates have an equal amount of time that counts down. They will get a 6-minute warning so they can know. There will be a 2-minute warning, and there will be a 40-second warning. I teach SAT prep. These are 1/3 proportions. Yes, and I'm going to have a student soon. The candidates don't even have to use any time because they're allowed to hoist a card, a green or a red card showing agreement with the other speaker or disagreement with the other speaker. Or in case the moderator is speaking instead of questioning, an agreement or a disagreement with our moderator. All is fair. So is a yellow card in case you are ambivalent. Our moderator is Mr. Gary Byron. He is here from Full Power Radio, also known as WDRC, the first station I ever listened to. Gary wasn't around. Mornings with Gary Byron airs there on 103.3 FM and 1360 AM, Monday through Friday, 6 to 10 AM. And we're very happy to have him here in Newington as a host for this congressional debate. You who are here are able to add one thing that no other debate does. You are being surveyed. Real time, you can respond with positives and negatives with cards that we all see. And you can even take a tally because you all have a sheet there. There's a sample sheet. I'll hold it up. First half, we'll then have a break, and the second half. And I've named this, there were 8 candidates, but they're not. But if anyone here can recognize these 8 names, you get a free beer. Henderson, Lansford, Canseco, McGuire, Weiss, Henderson, Gallego, Steinbach. Who am I referring to? Uh-oh, no beer for you. Yes. Yeah. The 1989 Oakland Athletics, the best team I ever witnessed. Absolutely. But here are the candidates, McCormick, Larson, Fay, and I will turn the show over to Mr. Gary Byron. Thank you all for being here.
And, thank you for I'm Gary Byron, as he says, from highway for this. It's also a very unique format. I'm excited to be a part of it. I wasn't even familiar with this format until you brought it to my attention. So I will start with the very first question. And I don't know who goes first. That's whoever wants to pick them. Lessen the impact of money on federal politics.
I'm happy to answer that. This question came up before, and I have a very strong stance on this. So my campaign, when I'm successful and I'm headed to Washington, will probably go on record as one of the most frugal, well-managed, and well-spent campaign. And it's all been money from individuals, and from $10 to $250 up to the max of $2,800, which, by the way, I got 2 of those.
Okay.
So it's all been single, donors that have come in and believed in our mission and our cause and support me. I believe that's the way to go. I truly do. I think Connecticut started a very good model whereby I did run for state rep a couple of years ago. The candidates had to raise a certain amount of money from individual contributors, just like I just spoke of. And then they got a grant from the state. So there was no special interest. There was no corporate money. There was no PACs. There were no lobbyists. My opponent here, I wish he was here because I'd like to hear him talk about this, has a war chest of $500,000. And he's got it from corporations. He's got it from special interests. He's got it from businesses in Connecticut and all around the country. He's got it everywhere. And he's got very little from single donors. So I don't think that's fair. It's certainly not fair for a new candidate trying to challenge the status quo and to try to change things, which we desperately need from a 22-year incumbent who probably spends most of his time attending fancy events, raising money from these large donors and special interests. I think that's wrong. I think it makes politicians beholden. I think it influences their votes. And I would do something about that. And the second thing I do something about is term limits. 22 years. What has Connecticut gone? Down the tubes. So what's happening here? We need fresh ideas. We need people who are going to change the status quo. And we need people who are going to work with others to get things done. I'm embarrassed to see what Congress does, which is basically nothing. It's a resistant party. What good is that doing us? We're failing here in Connecticut. We're number 4950. Maybe 48 in terms of economics. We're crashing, we're burning. Our major corporations, I'm a GE alum. You know how much that hurt for them to leave? A lot. It affected the communities, the contributions to charity, the colleges. I think you understand my point. No more special interest money. Take it out, it doesn't belong.
Also, I agree with a lot of what Mary says, that campaigns should be funded by small donations and corporate money needs to go. Absolutely. What she didn't mention was the real center of this issue, which is the Citizens United Supreme Court case that allows unlimited money to flow from the corporations and to some extent from the unions. Here's a prime example of the corrupting influence of this corporate money. Right now, the United States is launched on building the next generation fighter, the F-35. And recently, the Pentagon announced that at least $21 billion of brand new F-35s that they received, that the government, that the taxpayer, you and I are paying for, are so defective that they'll never see the skies. And what John Larson says, he takes a check from Raytheon and from United Technologies and the other war contractors, and what he says, build more. Now, one thing we could do, we could say that no money can come into a congressional district from outside the congressional district. That would be one way to limit influence from the corporations and other, it's not just corporations, of course, it's very wealthy donors. We have people with billions of dollars in their hands, if they so chose, and some of them do, could have a way oversized influence on the vote. What would happen if the Microsoft people or the Google people or one of these guys says, okay, well, there's a close race somewhere. Well, I'm going to spend a few $100 million. I mean, we see this in Florida going on with Bloomberg trying to influence the Florida election. What if people have the connection between Bloomberg and New York and Florida? Well, maybe there's some. I'm sure there's New Yorkers in Florida, but that's an example of an oversized influence of outside money, and that really needs to stop.
May I comment? Am I allowed to?
You can comment. Yeah, there's no time to make questions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Gary, for clarifying. So in terms of Citizens United, I think that was a very bad decision, and I agree with Tom on this one for sure. And in fact, at risking the chagrin of my own party, which I did in our last debate, and they asked about that, would I support it? And I said, no, I don't support the decision. And I think organizations, there's too much influence. So that demonstrates two things. I understand what's going on and where the money's coming from. And number two, I'm not afraid to stand up to my own party. I got some heat from Republicans afterwards. My heart is always in the right place, trying to do the right thing for residents. That's what we're here for.
All right, I'm going to ask the next question on this. What does the federal government do right?
Well, sure. One thing, it's supporting funding for the cleanup of Long Island Sound. It does that right, I'm pretty sure. It supports funding for the sewer treatment plants. I think it does that right. It's given us the interstate highways. I think it's done that right. So it sends checks through Medicare, and Social Security to citizens, especially the seniors and the kids, to keep them out of poverty. So the Social Security program, there's an example of something that's being done positively for the state of Connecticut by the federal government. Maybe it does a few things wrong, and it'd be really hard to explain because it's in the tax structure. But the federal government favors some corporations and businesses over others through a very subtle measure in the tax code by accelerated depreciation allowances, how it handles how fast you can write investments off, and that's wrong.
Yes, I would absolutely, positively. We need a federal government, clearly. We need to make sure different branches are functioning as they were designed. So you need the executive branch, you need the legislative branch, you need the judicial. So it's there for a purpose, and it's very important. And obviously we have state governments and we have municipal governments, which also are extremely important. I think the federal government, their role is really to oversee a lot of these other things that are happening. But one thing that I'm proud of from our federal government is I think they did a very good job, especially with this administration, of keeping us safe. So we haven't had, knock on wood, I don't even want to curse myself here, but we haven't had a domestic or any kind of terrorist activity going on where we've been attacked. So I think our defense is strong. I think we're using diplomacy to the best of our ability, and some amazing things have happened with some peace in the Middle East, finally. And I think that's due to our federal governments. And I think they're keeping our monetary system running and operating. Now, can they be criticized? Of course, but that goes into the legislative branch because they have the opportunity to make changes and make new laws and get things right. So to Mr. McCormick's point about the tax code, there's a lot of things I don't like about the tax code. There's a lot of things in there that I don't think are fair. There's a lot of things that need to be remedied, but where are people like Mr. Larson to make those changes and to advocate for those changes? That's their job. Do your job. It's not the executive branch's responsibility to make tax law changes. We all know where the loopholes are. They need to be closed. We need to help the middle class. They need tax breaks. We got to do what's right, but that's their job. And I want to see the legislative branch function more efficiently and more effectively.
Well, one thing, this is, she kind of alludes in a way to federalism and the role of government in our society when she talks about taxes. Taxes do determine quite a bit of what's going on. I'm not in favor of a middle tax cut, so pillar me, please, because we have a $20 trillion plus debt in this country right now. To cut taxes in a time when there are huge federal deficits and federal total debt, actually maybe 22 billion, Well, that's an irresponsible thing to say, and politicians say it all the time. I'm for cutting taxes, I'm for cutting taxes. But what we have are politicians who favor things but won't cop or support raising an equal amount of taxes to pay for those things that they say they want. And that's a problem.
Well, we've all heard the saying, rising tide rises all boats. And we know that to be true. So when you cut taxes and you stimulate the economy, more tax revenue will come in, the Laffer curve. Actually, Art Laffer was my economist when I worked at GE, and I learned a lot from him. And you can cut taxes and still raise overall revenue. Yes, you can. So that would be my proposal. And I think some of the tariff work that's been done to make our trade balances more fair, and the United States not getting the short end of the stick in both the trade deficit as well as being ripped off from our intellectual properties, is a step in the right direction. So there's lots of things we can do to stimulate the economy, get the economy going, make the United States a leader, and maybe it is more, nation kind of building, but make America a leader in the industries we want to be in, and stop importing all this junk overseas, stop the businesses from going overseas, repatriate them here and repatriate the jobs. So I believe there's a lot that can be done. The economy will take off, the tax revenue will come in, and we'll be able to fund programs that are much needed in this country.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this stuff about the Laffer curve, and if you cut taxes, it's going to be for more revenue. This is, I think, as George Bush regarded Reagan's plan when this stuff first came out. Yeah, voodoo economics. I think that's what it was called, voodoo economics. And this is just total nonsense. Or it's, it sounds wonderful.
Did we try that in the second? Good economy?
Well, not exactly. Let's go back to the Reagan years when this supply side economics first popped up. When did the United States start running these huge deficits? Under Reagan. Under Reagan is when this stuff, the huge deficits started. Under Reagan. Clinton did have a minor middle class tax cut. And it really depends on how, if you take that money. If you cut taxes and you put it into people's pockets, so they run to Toys R Us to buy toys from China, that doesn't support the economy. That's not something that adds economic productivity to the economy. It's really how the money is spent is what the crucial issue is. And I would say this to the voters. Put the Laffer curve, put voodoo economics into your browser when you get a chance. Put supply side into a browser when you get a chance and see what comes out.
We're going to questions I have. Manufacturer, maybe something which is as you both alluded to. One name on this dais here favoring federally funded project I-84. Slices down. Now that urban traffic has lessened, perhaps irrevocably, do you still favor the project? And if so, how can you bring it here? Your party does not fully control Congress now.
I've never favored it. So to your question, I've never favored it. Okay. This is like pie in the sky business. I think John Larson proposed that knowing that there was no feasibility to it, that he was fishing for votes from the construction trades, and that's the only reason he said it. I don't even think he was serious.
Well,
Yeah, I'll be brief. I call that project digging to China. It's not helpful. It's not useful. Mr. Larson, I beg to differ with you significantly. It's a way to pay back the unions. It's a way to get money to his constituents. It's nothing more than that. There wasn't a problem that you were trying to solve to begin with. You go to other places where I've lived. You go to Washington, DC, which I know you spend time there, but you're probably driven around. And you go to Boston and you go to Dallas, you go to these other places. They have major traffic problems. The fact that it takes 15 minutes to get over 84 bridge or 10 minutes to get over 91 during rush hour, that's not a problem. That's not a problem to solve. We need our bridges rebuilt. We need our airports rebuilt. Maybe we need another airport where your brother ran Tweed Airport. Gee, wonder how that happens for many years. We need infrastructure. We need to get commerce to come back here. We do not need a tunnel. What happened after the Boston tunnel was open? What happened? First one goes through it, ceilings cave in, killed a person. We don't need that kind of a mess. We need to make the roads that we have better. We need to do more things with our bridges and our airports and other things like that. Maybe the busway, maybe do something, although I'm not sure about that one. That's not working out economically right now. But you got to realize we have to be visionaries. You have to look forward. And the whole workplace is changing, driven by COVID. But there are so many people now who can work remotely. They're not going to open up these offices. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to be the way it used to be. Much more remote workers. I can live here if I choose and work someplace else, where before I had to actually move or commute. So we don't need this. It's a waste of money.
I want to change our discussion from governance over to socialism. Why should the federal government support people who don't want to work?
The federal government doesn't support anyone that wants to work. I mean, this is typical. This is typical right-wing attempt to say something that really doesn't exist. If you don't want to work, you're homeless on the streets of Hartford and you're living in a cardboard box under the interstate, as we've seen. That sort of thing does exist. The churches kind of help at times with their soup kitchens. But what government should help people, I would say, on a few things. All of us do not have equal abilities. The government does a very good job right now supporting those that have 120 IQ, people that are, say, Ivy bound, since we're here. They do an excellent job. There's support for higher education. Government does well there, but it doesn't help the people with the 80 IQ. And we got to understand that there are just as many people with an 80 IQ as 120 IQ. Not everyone has the ability to read the fine lines on a credit card agreement to understand what's going on. There are a lot of people that don't understand when we had these mortgages that were debt traps. We had debt trap mortgages for people that led to the housing crash and then to the Great Recession. There's a lot of people that simply do not have the ability to fully understand the modern economy, modern technology, and government does need to step in and protect them from the depredations of the market.
Yes, I do. Absolutely. Look, I was raised a Christian. I'm a devout Christian now, and I'm raising my daughter that way. I don't believe letting people live on the streets or being unfed or unclothed. I certainly don't, Tom. That's not my position at all. But the question was very directly, who don't want to work. That's a whole different issue. And I believe that the best result and the way you're going to attain your dreams, the American dream, or any other dream that you have, is through hard work and applying yourself to the best of your ability. I understand people aren't made equally in terms of their intellect. I get that. But there are other avenues in social services to help folks who, aren't the upper, whatever you want to call it, but aren't built the same way. I am concerned about welfare and things like that becoming generational. Why is that? It's not good for the person. It's not good for the family. It's not good for future generations. We all want to do better, and not just economically. We all want to go to some sort of education, whether it's the trades or something, to learn a craft, learn a way to make a living. We all want to be able to provide for our families through good nutrition and good food. And we all want to be able to celebrate in some fashion, whatever religious holidays we celebrate or birthdays. You have to earn money to do that. Now, what's wrong with the handouts, I believe in hand-ups and getting people into the workforce if they're able, is that the generational thing becomes so repetitive that people just give up hope. And then the other thing is, I read an article that somebody with 2 children who's given subsidized or Section 8 housing, SNAP, as we call it here, food subsidies, heating, oil help, all that other kind of thing, transportation, Medicaid, that's the equivalent of a $60,000 a year job. And I know people who are eking it out at much less than that, trying to get by with the aspiration that they're going to increase their income. That's not fair. We've got to make the system fair, and we've got to take care of the people who can't take care of themselves. But the ones that can, we've got to get them off of this system that's really not helping them. I'm really concerned about the person in the system. It's not helping them.
Look, along the same line.
Where and both sides bring up a very I can't read that. Oh, okay. A very interesting point. Currently, throughout the coronavirus, there's been a lot of people who've been furloughed, laid off, or just let go because their industry, particularly mom and pop small businesses, have just gone out of business. They don't have the corporate support structurally to sustain their livelihoods here. And there are people who got laid off and found other work that they could do. It wasn't exactly what they were doing last, but they could do it. And they made a conscious decision not to take it because a combination of the unemployment check that they were receiving on the state level, combined with the additional supplemental $600 that they were receiving federally, it just wasn't advantageous. They were making more money sitting at home doing nothing than accepting that other work that they can do. So, and I guess this is the area that scares me. Are we being enablers, allowing people to milk off of the government, state, federal, or otherwise? And when you hear that, does that bother you? Particularly when I'm talking about able-bodied individuals. Either one of you. I'd like to hear both of you weigh in.
I don't think kind of handouts, period. I have a letter to the editor on my site, townforcongress.org, where I call for basically what used to be called the Civilian Conservation Corps, or federal programs where the unemployed can go and work and be productive citizens and contributing to the society by doing something that will benefit all of society, whether it's reforestation, trail work, environmental cleanup. I don't believe people should just get a check and do nothing for it. They should work. It's something we don't have, and if you pay any attention to history, the Republicans vehemently were opposed to FDR's program, like the Civilian Conservation Corps or Works Progress Administration or anything like that. And in fact, the whole neocon movement over the last decades have been trying to overturn the New Deal that would provide for that. Opportunity, well, this was mentioned over here. And I'd like the reader to at least look at a book review of Joseph Stiglitz, who's a Nobel Prize winning economist, book, The Price of Inequality. He addresses this opportunity issue, and he definitively shows that while once upon a time, let's say in the 50s, there was real opportunity for all. Strive, work hard. You're going to get ahead. You're going to join the middle class. Increasingly in the United States of America today, that is not the case. We are falling behind in opportunity compared to other industrialized, advanced economic societies. We've seen federal cuts to education. Why is that? And I don't remember the exact statistic, but you can look it up in The Price of Inequality. Those that are on the bottom, born into the urban poor areas, the bottom 20%, so to speak, overwhelmingly, they stay in that bottom 20% economically. Those that are born in the top 20% overwhelmingly stay in the top 20%. And it's not because necessarily they're brighter or work harder or have different values, not because they have a Protestant work ethic. It's because they have parents behind them that are able to invest in them. So that's a big reason why we have an increasing disparity in incomes and wealth in this country. Going back to this handouts business and generations, I thought under Clinton, we had a Welfare Reform Act that ended that pretty much.
Oh, yes, sure. That was a lot to digest, Tom. So Your question was about the unemployment and the COVID relief and incentives. Yeah. So yeah. Oh, I think more so in my example, where if you're on public assistance in all facets, that the government takes care of all your living needs. Yes, we are, because they're doing better than the working poor. In my example, I described, $60,000 worth of benefits versus somebody who's eking out a living at 35,000 and supporting their family. We've got to true that up somehow. Either take the entitlements down or boost up these working poor who are trying to make it in society, and either help them with their health, childcare or something else. The person who took advantage of the unemployment and the COVID, I think needed something for sure. But if a job came along, you got to look long-term. And I think those people who settled for the government payouts, it's going to be tough when the economy does rebound, and it will, because a lapse in employment is very detrimental. Hey, look, I've been out of work, and not because of anything that I've ever done. Corporate mergers occur, new management comes in, and I think there's more to work than just earning a paycheck. I think the dignity of work, the contribution that you're making to society, getting up and having a purpose every day is extremely meaningful, regardless of the income that you're making. I picked tobacco when I was 14 years old because I wanted to earn a paycheck. And I started babysitting. Then I got a job in a restaurant, and then I went to college, and then I worked part-time, and I got a job right out. But you've got to have a goal. And I think your point, Tom, that I do agree with you about is the set of parents that you're born to who take an interest in you and foster you and guide you and support you. It's like winning the lottery. And I wish more people had parents like mine. I really and truly do. They were fantastic and still are. But some people don't win that lottery, and some people really aren't responsible parents. That's a whole different cultural issue that we need to solve for. But the direct question is, we can't make it more appealing and the person better off being on social programs than they are, and they learn the dignity of work, they learn satisfaction and achievement. So I just think a job really helps everybody.
I'm going to ask you one other question under socialism before we get to another phase or another module of questions. But before I do that, I know, Tom, you'd wanted to weigh in one more time.
But let's look at what actually exists in our economy, and that's unemployment. And unemployment, unfortunately, is a result of a defined federal policy, both at the Federal Reserve, at the Treasury, in the tax structure, and in regulations. Back in 1948, we had a Labor Act that said the purpose of the federal government was to ensure full employment. Around 1975, 1976, that was done away with. And the whole focus of macroeconomic policy on the big picture shifted to fighting inflation. That was a concern. And the federal government and the international banks and the financial industry in whole was more concerned about inflation than employment. Because the general thinking, and I'm certain it's correct, is that as employment increases, you put more people to work, inflation will increase along with it. And the bondholders do not like inflation, and we have to realize that bondholders hold more wealth, way more wealth than all the equity markets combined, way more. So as soon as the government shifts to full employment policies, we saw this with the Democrats under Humphrey Hawkins once upon a time, they get up in arms, and I don't.
Why can't private welfare replace government welfare? Why can't private welfare replace government welfare?
Well, that's the scope, size of it. Okay, it's just too much. I think on the family level, we see it. You see families, private welfare, when a family member helps another family member, that's private welfare. And sometimes organizations, say like the Lions, community organizations sometimes do step in and provide some welfare from a private source. No problem with that. That's good. I'm a big proponent of civil society. Otherwise, I prefer individuals to organize communally in civil society to do everything possible that they can. Charity is great in a way, but there's something different about charity that I do not like. There's something about charity I don't like. I'll try to explain it this way. Heard comments. People, when they throw coins to the poor, why do they do it? Because it makes them feel good. This is not policy.
I think there's tremendous organizations that are funded, nonprofits that are funded purely by charitable contributions and some grants. I mean, there's some government grants that these organizations get, and they help people in addition to our social welfare safety net that we have in the government. Clearly, they do have the ability. I think Americans are generous. I think Americans want to help each other. I think Americans want to see their money, if they have some extra, go to somebody in need. I think we've proven that time and time again. If there's a cause out there and people feel strongly about it, the contributions come in, whether I like them or not. And some of them I think I wouldn't support, but that's not my choice. That's the people's choice. So I think that we probably could transition over to some combination where charity and people's good fortune could go into some sort of private welfare, if you will. I believe it can happen. You know, the churches, for example, are all funded by charitable contributions. Museums, there's a whole bunch. I could go on and on about what's funded by private contributions. We just have to have the will. We have to make the determination that that's where we want it to go. And I really do believe that charity begins at home, and that charity can help solve this problem and, you know, and help get people back to work. I think that's the key.
To acquaint, if you're just joining us, we're in the middle. This is a halfway mark of the government information forums. Nothing like this in Connecticut, maybe even beyond. So I just want to thank people behind the scenes. You may have seen Gary Byron, moderator. We thank the candidates who are here, Mary Fay, Tom McCormick, and the voters here who do have say. And I'm going to be running up for the second half other questions that have come about now from audience members. So Gary's going to have a choice, not just the scripted questions, but if he thinks these have dignity, then he can add them as well. Let me add the dignified timekeeper, Ms. Maya Palanke, high schooler from West Hartford, and she actually is going to let us know how much time each candidate has remaining. So Ms. Maya, how much time remaining for Mary Fay?
You have 12 minutes and 48 seconds.
McCormick?
13 minutes and 51 seconds.
And just in case Congressman Larson would like to come in, we have a phone that can be in your place. You have the invitation. You would have half the time that the people here showing up have, but we give you that time to respond. We hope you will do this, if not today, in the next 9 days, because you got some very good candidates and very good ideas that deserve your response. I'll bring it back to Gary and the crew. Thank you all for listening.
Say it in a few ways. Fighting global warming, you say, well, that's not around here, right? Well, it is. But Long Island Sound's heating up, and we saw this Vibrio disease break out this summer. We've seen it start in '98. Increasing, the oyster industry is going to get wiped out. Some of the people in the first district eat oysters and shellfish, and also work in that industry. I think the big thing to do is we have a lot of machine shops and industry, and it's really it's the rust the Rust Belt, not quite so bad as out west. But we need investment in science, basic science and technology, way more than what we have. The people that want to cut government don't want to support investment. Basically, it's unfortunate. There's something called additive manufacturing, where instead of cutting metal away, you formulate the material to the shape that you want it to start with. Computer machine tooling. We need to invest in high tech in the first district, and robotics, and of course the technical training to go along so individuals know how to operate these machines. So we need also conversion away from the war industries. Pratt & Whitney, I mentioned the F-35 before. Nobody will ever build in this flying turkey. You can't get to the skies, what, 11% of the time it's available. 89% of the time it can't fly. And that's from Pratt & Whitney's engines, partly catch on fire a lot. So we need to transition away from the war industries in Connecticut to productive industries. Now, new technologies, like for instance, wind turbines. Why isn't Electric Boat, who has people with the training, machinery, but capital, not building wind turbines, which are just about the cheapest form of energy, cheaper than coal, cheaper than the nukes, cheaper than oil, cheaper than gas. So we need to retool our first district economy away from old tech into new tech.
Well, I think first and foremost, with COVID still among our midst, Congress needs to do their job. So when I get to Congress, they need to pass the stimulus. It's ridiculous that it's laden with pork and all these things that aren't COVID related, and they blame the Senate. Well, the blame game doesn't work, Congressman Larson. You can't blame Trump for everything that's happened in your 22-year reign. He's only been in office for not quite 4 years. And that's ridiculous. Finger pointing accomplishes absolutely nothing. Get the stimulus done. Get the stimulus done. That's the first thing. Do your job. Second of all, in terms of Connecticut, I disagree with Mr. McCormick about not having a defense industry. That's something that was in dire straits, which is now better in Washington. So if we are at war or face an attack, I hope we never are again. These ones under the Obama administration just went on and really didn't help us with any of our interests. We'll be prepared for that. We'll be prepared. We'll have the armament and things that are necessary if that should happen. And I think it should dissuade others from doing harmful things to us. I think the other thing, of course, is jobs related. And we know that our workforce is not prepared to attract some of these high tech and other industries that are doing well, pharmaceuticals in places like Boston. Why is everybody leaving to go to Boston or New York, other than their big cities? Hartford used to be the cream of the crop to attract those kind of things because we were more affordable. We're not anymore. So we need to work on bringing jobs back here, whether it's investing in tech schools, bringing trades back to the schools, having an alternate path for children who are in high school. I remember in my day, again, I'm aging myself here, but there was auto mechanics and there was electrician. You could be an apprentice. By the time you got out of high school, you could go right into apprenticeship for electricians and plumbers. That's fantastic. We need to do more of that. We need to get ready for our workforce because we're not ready. So those are two things that I would do and bring back the money to invest in Connecticut to do that. I could go on a lot about this, but I think those are two key ideas.
I was going to say, Tom wants to take, let me just caution people. Time. There are three there from viewers. So Tom, my job is not to stop. I will absolutely give you your time. Do you want a second time?
Real quick.
Okay.
She brought up COVID. Well, what will we do for the first district regarding COVID? I've been advocating for a long time now that COVID vaccination research must be made open source, that all labs, public and private, should be sharing to the net so everyone can see what research is going on. You don't know. There may be a young lady like this sitting at her computer in her darkened basement somewhere, looking at the screen and comparing the viruses and have an aha moment and have the solution. So this is kind of part of this business about socialism or not having socialism. Well, Open source, I guess, is socialism because it's sharing.
You can go back a second or third time. These rules are very open, but then there may be a question later, and again, from the people watching, in which you guys or maybe even like, oh my goodness, I was so that's all. Be cognizant of where you are. When we tell people where they are remaining, it's still at 10 minutes. Well, these are again, these are right from our viewers. With what's your stance on reforming police departments across Connecticut, and of course, would mean national as well.
May I please?
Sure.
I back the blue 100%. And I think public safety is something that people are so concerned about in Connecticut and elsewhere. It's a top priority. It's the economy, it's education, and it's public safety. I back all first responders, firemen, policemen, the National Guard, nurses, and even teachers. I would put them as first responders because they're on the front line with our children. I happen to come from a family of educators as well as New York police departments. And I know what they risk every day that they go out. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need some reform. We absolutely positively do. If there are bad guys, we've got to break the blue line and they need to come forward and get rid of these guys. I mean, you can get fired in almost any job, but it's very difficult with unions in the police department and fire department. So I think the bad apples absolutely have to be held accountable. But look what's happening now. I mean, Hartford, since this whole crime bill went through, that really limited the policeman's ability to counter crime. The violent crimes, shootings are up 50%. And now Luke Bronin, who backed this, the Democrats who backed this, they want state police to help them. We've got to give these guys the latitude to do their job. They have to be able to get rid of the bad guys on the streets. And I know that if something happens, someone's breaking in my house, I want the police there. I want them there in 1 minute or less. And I want them to be armed, and I want them to take care of the offender who broke into my property and could possibly hurt my family. I believe in police, and most of them are good. Get rid of the bad ones. I absolutely agree with that, and invest in some more training. I meet with, as a town councilor, with our police chief in West Hartford. I think the world of him. I think he's outstanding, and he's even going to do more training, even though we have one of the best trained police forces in the state. So there's always room for improvement, but don't punish these guys so that they can't do their jobs. That's absolutely positively wrong, and it puts our public safety at risk. I know Congressman Larson has never come out strong for public safety and police officers, but I will, and I do, and I have.
I think Mary here goes off the topic quite a bit here. Of course, everyone supports the police. The police accountability bill did not limit the police's ability to take down a shooter on the streets or to investigate a shooter that's murdered someone. There's no decrease in their ability. What we have to think about is, what do we do with the SWAT squad that gunned down Jose Soto in Manchester? Young man, minor crime, he's violating his probation by going to his mother's house. He walks out the front door of his mother's house and is gunned down in a hail of bullets from 4 officers. How do we hold those officers accountable? So the question is, did those officers act with malfeasance? Did they go to the site with the intention of likely killing someone? They're trained to do it. So I think what happens is there's a certain mindset that can set in as part of it, in which we have to make sure we have extreme selection of police officers. We also have to make sure that the officer is able to handle adrenaline rushes. That is a big part of this. People will get in a situation where there's possible violence. It's either flight or fight, and we have a lot of fighting. Police need to be retrained in order to take a suspect under custody and with more non-violent means. I don't understand when Jose Soto came out the door. If, let's say, Jose Soto was a 600-pound bear with big teeth, and big claws, and he could swipe a SWAT officer and take his guts out. Deep would have been called. They would have given him a tranquilized dart and thrown a net over him, caged them up and taken him away. Why doesn't that happen? Why aren't these violent suspects resisting arrest? Why aren't they netted? Why aren't they lassoed? So we need a lot of retraining. We need different technologies to bring suspects under control. I don't understand right now, there's some kind of real fancy lasso, all kind of segment, real high-tech lasso. Things like that can help. And I'll say this, back to blue, of course. George Floyd incident, of course, brought a lot of this stuff on. I don't think the officer that was kneeling on George Floyd's neck had any intent to kill him. It's certainly not a case of first-degree murder. But what I do blame for George Floyd's death is the police chief of that department. It was known that suspects have been rendered unconscious by having their neck kneeled on, at least 5 cases. But yet that police chief continued to train his officers in its use. So we need different techniques in order to handle violent suspects, to arrest suspects. You know what I say, kind of a little bit cutely, we need more ranger walkers out there.
May I just, for one reason, Tom, with all due respect, I'm sure that if someone was barging in your door with a gun, I'm sure you'd want the police there in 2 seconds. And I believe we have to back them. There's adverse consequences from the police act that we passed in Connecticut. Many are retiring well before they need to or want to, in fact. But the sentiment, anti-police sentiment that we have in this state, particularly in our cities, it's making them not want to do things and fight crime the way they should. Now, you cited some examples. Yes, they happen, and they're terrible. And no one should condone any of those kind of actions. The guys get arrested, they get punished, and they should be punished to the full extent of the law. But when you put somebody in a job to enforce public safety, and you take away the tools that they have to do that, or you make them second guess their decisions, they're not going to be effective. And there's some Democrats who have gone so far as they want no police forces. They want them all abolished. They want ICE abolished. We need law and order. I'm sorry. I wish everybody was a good guy and a good citizen and wasn't out to hurt others, but there are those kind of people, and I want to be protected in myself and my daughter.
Police accountability law does not prevent a police officer from coming to your home and protecting you. Police accountability law does not take any tool away from the officers. And if I'm mistaken on that, please cite a tool that's been taken away from the police officer. Their guns haven't taken away.
They're not using goggles. They're guys that are taking.
How does that do with accountability?
That is in the language of the bill.
If you have an elderly relative with dementia and that you are whose care is in your hands, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, this elderly person with dementia decides to walk out the house and walk about your community, night vision goggles had been used to locate those individuals in the past. So I just wanted to let the record stand corrected that there have been tools in the toolbox that have been restrained according to this law.
All right, so
Wait. Okay. If you know that you're personally accountable for something that happens on your job, you personally, not the town, not the police force, not this, you are personally, how likely are you going to be to run to the scene? And so, wait. And the second thing about that is what's going to happen because of this liability. We're not going to be able to get police officers who fit your description of being above the cream of the crop. We're not going to be able to get them because they're not going to want to do this. They'll do something else. And guess what else is going to happen? Municipalities are going to pay the price because they're going to have to get insurance. And the last figure I saw, it's going to cost $1,000 extra for these towns, which are already broke, to per person, per police officer, to get this liability insurance to be able to get policemen in their jobs. So there's lots of consequences. I think it's a bad idea. I think we need to back public safety officials, and this is not the way to do it. More training, yes, I'm all for. Penalizing and punishing to the full extent of the law the bad ones, absolutely. And am I ashamed that something like George Floyd happened? Absolutely. That's terrible. But when you take all these things, and I'm not making excuses, It's not the everyday police, run-of-the-mill police. I never heard of the Jose Soto case. I'll have to look that up. But it's not something that's a daily occurrence or that happens every day.
Do you want to go back to that?
All I think that's police enforcing the law. That's kind of a distraction. Of course, everyone backs the blue, really. Why would a person in Hartford, this is a very inexact case. We had an instance a few years ago. There was a gentleman in Hartford, and he was having a very bad day. He had a history of mental illness and emotional disturbance. He was wigging out, and his family called the police. Okay, guess what happened? Within the hour, he was dead on the front lawn of the family home. This is what has to stop. So retraining, accountability. When it's a very rare case would that bill ever apply to anyone. An officer would have to be saying, "You goddamn that, bam, 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 bam," take his gun out and shoot someone for that law to be in effect.
Not offer opinions, because I am not critiquing. I only set facts straight, not offer my opinion.
Thank you.
The next question, because this is what it's coming from. One thing the federal government is doing right for education. What is one thing you
Improve. Absolutely. The bankruptcy laws. Right now we have people that try to get ahead, right? And they sign up for something like Phoenix Online University. They go in debt to do so, or they sign up for one of these hair places or a nail salon, or all across, a lot of different skills. Overwhelmingly, they end up in more debt and untrained than you would expect to happen. It's pretty much across the board. And they go into bankruptcy court, that debt is not dischargeable. So you change the bankruptcy law for debts to be dischargeable. You make the lenders of the money more responsible to who they lend money to. That's part of the problem. We have lenders lending money to people who have very little ability to pay back educational funds. Another thing we could do is have federal assumption of student debt. If you have student debt on a credit card, it's 20% plus. Right? 20% plus. The federal government could assume that debt for everyone and administer the repayment of that debt back through the internal revenue system. Otherwise, if you have debt, you could pay it back when you fill out your 1040. A very efficient system. And what they're doing wrong, generalized cut federal support for education. The state has cut. UConn, I went through UConn at minimum wage. Actually got out of there with a little bit of money in the bank. That's not possible.
Sure. So I guess I'd start with public education at the grade school levels and high school. I think the government should probably, other than funding, which we do need federal government money to keep these things going. I mean, if the public school education in my town is more than the budget for the operating the town. So it's growing and growing and growing. So, but I'm a big fan. I mean, I'm a product of public education. I had great education. I had a terrific, but I think they should really let the teachers teach. That's what they went to college for. That's their profession. I'm a product of a school teacher. My mom and my sister teaches, and I'm very respectful and fond of teachers. They have a special place in my heart. I have a lot of friends who are teachers, but Common Core, it's a disaster. And you ask any teacher, those kind of programs should not be mandated on local school boards. It's ridiculous. It's really not accomplishing anything. And I believe you want to get back to, creativity and innovation and letting kids be free thinkers, give them some more time to play as they go through school, so that school becomes a very enjoyable experience and they want to continue their learning. Now, when it comes time for secondary education, we've got a lot of choice. I'd like to see more choice in public education where the non-performing schools are either made up and shored up so that they do give these kids in inner cities and other places a good education, or these kids get to go somewhere else. I know they have Chef versus O'Neill, but that's been a disaster because half magnet schools are half empty and their results aren't any better than the schools that the kids came from. So we're doing something wrong, and money's not always the answer. So secondary education, colleges, et cetera, are way too expensive, even UConn. And I don't think it's right. The costs have gotten out of control. It's way beyond that in healthcare, which was another conversation, but those costs have just exploded and they raise way more than inflation or any other rate. It's nonsensical. And you're going to get to the point where, which we don't want to get to, that only those with the means go to college and others don't. I believe that's wrong. And I don't support that. I think anybody who has the capability and earns their way in through achievement, scholastic achievement, should and wants to go to college, should be able to. Now, I know that we can't have pre-college across the board. That's ridiculous. That means more burden on the taxpayers, but we've got to do more in terms of achievement grants that kids can earn to go to college. So that would be some of my solutions. But in terms of public education and the schools, get out of the way. We need your money because they're expensive, but we want good education. We want to get back where we were. We want to get back with the Japanese kids and other kids who are really killing it in high tech and other areas. We need to make America a leader in that.
I'm happy to go back to you. There's one more question I want to go to, though, just because.
I support Common Core. You have to realize that Common Core is one of these anti-government sort of things on the right, and you have to realize why. Where did the opposition of Common Core come from? Florida retirement communities, places like that. Common Core, anti-Common Core is anti-education. It's groups of people who do not want to fully invest in education. Local education is okay, but people move from town to town, people move from state to state. And people, in order to function in our democracy, we do need, let's say, not Common Core, but we need common knowledge. So when we go to talk to our fellow citizens, we have an idea of what we're talking about with each other, that we have an idea what that other person knows. So that's very important.
Okay, here is the final question. This one right here. I'm talking about what was responsible for 18 years of prosperity from 1982 until 2001?
There was not prosperity for the average middle class person from the dates you cite. We've had a tremendous disconnect between the value that each worker is producing into the economy and the money coming back to them in wages. During the 50s, and then I think into the 60s also, I'm not sure the exact cutoff, certainly by the Reagan years, we saw that the difference between what a worker produces and the amount of money that's returned to them and the value of their labor has been declining. One way to put it is, over a recent period, and this is generalized, 100% increase, or actually more like 1,000% increase, worker doubles their economic output, okay? Doubles their economic output. The percentage of that output in terms of value returned to them has been less than 10%. Now, all the money has been going to capital and not back to the people that are actually producing value. Also, we've seen a tremendous increase in economic inequality, and that is stifling growth. When you have tremendous concentrations of wealth at the top, you get monopolies and oligopolies, and it's in the interest of the monopolists to stifle competition. Here's a perfect example of this, Microsoft. We had Netscape browser, it was a very good browser, but Microsoft used monopoly power to put Netscape out of business. So we have to worry about monopoly power. I'm sorry, Gary, I just don't agree with your premise. The middle class has not been rising. Real wages have stagnated in this country. Different people put it different places. Some people say 86. They slightly rose under the Clinton years, and then under Bush and after, wages have stagnated again. Last 3 years, we've seen just a little tiny blip up. So no, the American economic system is not performing for the average American public.
Yeah, gotcha. But it's a question from a viewer or listener. I'll repeat the question. What was responsible for 18 years of prosperity from 1982?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, a lot of things. So I happen to just be, 1983 is when I entered the workforce, the real workforce, not tobacco picking anymore. And after college, and that was a recession actually. So I'm not sure if the person's got the right time period, because I was one of my few friends who actually got a job. It was very hard to get one. There wasn't a lot of hiring going on. But in any event, there was a period of growth there for sure. And I'd rather talk about what's going on now with the Trump economy. Real wages did rise for everybody. They certainly did. And everybody benefited from the tax cuts. I know people are going to say, no, only the top. Well, of course they did, because they were invested in equity markets and things like that. But everybody did. Everybody who was in the workforce and everybody who had a 401k or whatnot absolutely benefited from the recent economy. Now, going back to 82 and 2001, I would say that tax cuts helped spur the economy on and created innovation where people were investing. That's when the tech started, really, with the internet and people getting involved in technology. And then 2001, it ended because the tech bubble boom burst. I think that was the right time. I might have my time frames not exactly correct, but I think that's when that happened. So, and as well as some other things in world events. So I think good tax policy, good economic policy, companies growing and hiring more. And I think those who took advantage of it did benefit.
We have an economy under Trump built on debt. Eventually, debt has to be repaid. The Trump economy has been a false economy.
Let me ask our attention what each person, how much time each person has.
Has 1 minute and 58. Thomas Hornick has 1 minute and 5 seconds.
I'm going to ask one final question because I'm informed that time. And I think it's a great way to end this debate with the absolute question. There are choices that people have in the first congressional. There is John Larson, a Democrat incumbent. There is Rick Perry, who is the Republican challenger, as well as Tom McCormick from the. I would say there's the same thing if John Larson were in the room. Presumably at some point he will watch this. Why is the incumbent John Larson and that you do better? Bring to the table that the voter needs to know in order to make a truly education vote, educated vote, rather than, well, John Larson or whomever is the name that I don't want to vote for a recognized name. Sometimes you do that when you're young. If you're a first-time voter, you vote for, I never heard of this person, this person, this person. I'll vote for the person I know. And you come to find out later in life as you gain more life experience. Who is this person I've been voting for because I know that name? That's up to my core values. Why should an educated voter then vote for you? What are you going to do different?
Yeah, I think as you heard as we went along, I had a very specific proposal, like on COVID, vaccination research, which is like an immediate issue of the day. I generally would say this to the voter. I think I got a clue of what's going on. Very extensive reader of nonfiction literature, history, politics, economic, political science, and a lot of understanding, not just of what has happened in the past, and also the recent past and the near term. I have, I think, a very good handle on what the problems are, and monetary policy, fiscal policy. And I would say this: if the voter wants global warming stopped, and that's going to be an immensely destructive to the planet, I'm the candidate. If you want this wasteful Pentagon spending to end, it's like $750 billion plus when there's no substantial enemy out there. That has got to stop. So I'm saying I bring a wealth of knowledge. I bring wealth of knowledge to the table, and I think I have be beneficial.
I've got a minute and 38 seconds.
Okay, there you go.
I've been keeping track of that. I've learned the hard way. Yeah, certainly. So none of this is personal. I like Congressman Larson. We both grew up in East Hartford, and I just think he's been in too long, 22 years. I think he's become beholden to the special interests. I think he's not innovative. I don't think he's done anything different. And quite frankly, I'm very, very scared of the direction of the entire Democrat Party, where they're going so far to the left. And Nancy Pelosi, Congressman Larson, and many others are following people like AOC and the squad. And that makes me very, very nervous. And it makes me very concerned, as I think most people do. I'm in the middle. And my colors for my campaign are purple for a reason. I will work with anybody who wants to get things done. And I've demonstrated that. Please look at my track record. I'm a seasoned businesswoman. I've turned around large corporations that were failing. I've made a definite contribution in my business experience. And I want to apply that to government, do things on a factual basis, not just emotion. We need to have the facts. We need to analyze them. I am a deductive reasoning person, but I also went to a college that fostered creativity and innovation. I will bring that into politics, and I will do the right thing. I will not be beholden. I'm fiercely independent. I always have been. You can look at my record. I've gone against my party. I am not a party politician. I'm actually not a politician, period. I'm a person who's very concerned about our future in Connecticut, who's very concerned about the future of the United States. And I believe we're going in the wrong direction, Congressman Larson. And it is time for a change in the 1st District. And I'm the person who's going to bring about that change.
Okay. Listen, of all very likable candidates, so I'm critical for that. There was everybody that was
That's an asset to the both of you. You know, folks, a lot of times, you know, in my line of work, and I've held elected office up at our state capitol for a couple of terms in the House of Representatives. I've also been a morning show host on a political, on Morning Drive Radio on WDRC, where I currently have my career. The thing I hear most often is I'm very sick and tired of the direction that our state is going in, or I'm sick and tired of the direction our nation is going in, or if you want to, even though today's not, or this year isn't a municipal year, or if you want to keep it local, that our town, our municipality is going in. And then you always, I'll hear, I'll vote them all out and get some new blood in. This is your opportunity to be heard. Make sure that you do exercise your right to vote on Tuesday, November 3rd. I can tell you this, also contact your elected officials, whether it's on the local, the state, or the federal level. Get a hold of them. Let them know that you vote, you have an opinion, and that it should be heard. Okay, and that's basically, that's a key. That is so important. It's not just exercising your right to vote, it's making sure that your vote and your voice is heard. I want to thank Mark, of course, for your time here as well, Mia as well for taking the time, AJ for your help as well, and our candidates. Really, I'm so sorry, and it's rather unfortunate that John Larson, the incumbent Democrat, the first Tom, who I never met before, it's really. Folks, head out to the polls Tuesday, November 3rd. Mark, thanks again for having me here. Jerry Violet, the DRC, join me Wednesday morning. Everybody here, thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.